the human relic hunter. Chapter 6, Humanity's Graveyard. The stars warped and stretched before snapping back into place as the shuttle exited hyperspace. Durin leaned forward in the captain's chair, his antennae twitching as the scene outside the viewport came into focus. "Okay," he muttered. "That's a lot." Before them lay a dense field of debris stretching as far as the eye could see. Shattered hulls of ships, both Terran and alien, floated lifelessly, their jagged forms casting long shadows against the faint glow of the dying red star at the center of the system. "Fascinating," Seraph's voice cut in, his usual tone tinged with something bordering on reverence. "The wreckage is consistent with a large-scale battle, likely thousands of years old. Note the distinctive architecture of the Terran vessels, sleek and functional, even in destruction." "Yeah, sleek," Durin said, squinting at a particularly massive hull fragment spinning slowly. "But also very blown up," Bolt chirped from his console, his optics glowing brightly as he scanned the debris. "Relics detected. Analysis suggests Terran origin. Potential value high." "Of course you're thinking about treasure," Durin said, smirking. "We're surrounded by centuries-old destruction, and you're ready to start looting." "Treasure. Relevant," Bolt replied innocently. "It's relevant to getting us killed if you're not careful," Seraph interjected. "The energy readings from the debris suggest some remnants still hold power, potentially active systems, including weaponry. I recommend proceeding with caution." Durin leaned back, running a claw along the edge of the armrest. "Caution's my middle name." "Then your birth certificate was clearly a work of fiction," Seraph quipped. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it navigated through the field, its advanced sensors mapping the area. Durin guided the ship with practiced ease, weaving between shattered hulls and jagged fragments of metal. The faint glow of the dying star bathed the scene in an otherworldly light, casting stark shadows across the debris. "You ever seen anything like this, Seraph?" Durin asked, his voice quieter now. "Not firsthand," Seraph admitted. "The scale of this battle rivals the greatest recorded conflicts in Terran history. The fact that so many vessels, Terran and alien, were destroyed suggests a catastrophic event." "Catastrophic's one word for it," Durin muttered. He gestured toward a mangled alien vessel drifting nearby, its design jagged and asymmetrical. "What's that one?" "Doesn't look Terran." "Unknown," Seraph replied. "Its architecture is unfamiliar, but its weapon mounts suggest it was a formidable opponent. Perhaps a rival empire, or one of the countless species Terrans encountered during their expansion." Bolt chirped excitedly. "Structure intriguing. Recommendation, closer examination." "No way," Durin said, shaking his head. "We're not poking anything that might still have guns attached to it. I like my limbs where they are." "Prudent," Seraph said approvingly, "though it's rare to hear you advocate for self-preservation." "Even I have limits," Durin replied, grinning. "Besides, you're the one who'd have to clean up the mess if I got myself vaporized." As the shuttle drifted deeper into the debris field, the scale of the destruction became even more apparent. Entire fleets lay scattered, their once mighty forms reduced to twisted metal and broken dreams. "It's eerie, isn't it?" Durin said, his voice softer now. "All this chaos frozen in time, like the galaxy just stopped caring." "The galaxy rarely cares, Captain," Seraph replied. "But you're correct, the stillness is unnerving. Whatever transpired here left a mark that time has yet to erase." Bolt tilted his dome, his chirps softer. "Terran relics, significant. Legacy, important." Durin glanced back at the little drone, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're not wrong, buddy. This is history out here, even if it's a history nobody wants to remember." A soft chime interrupted the moment, and Seraph's voice grew sharper. "Captain, I'm detecting a faint but consistent energy signature ahead. It appears to be emanating from a large structure near the system's star." Durin's antennae twitched. "You mean the vault?" "Most likely," Seraph said. "The energy readings suggest intermittent functionality, likely due to the star's waning power. However, I recommend maintaining a safe distance until we have more data." Durin grinned, adjusting the controls to steer the shuttle toward the source. "Safe distance? Where's the fun in that?" "Fun," Seraph said flatly, "is inversely proportional to survival. Proceed cautiously." As the massive silhouette of the vault began to emerge from the shadows, Durin couldn't help but let out a low whistle. The construct was immense, its surface covered in intricate glyphs that shimmered faintly in the dying light of the star. Even in disrepair, it radiated an air of authority and power. "Now that," Durin said, leaning forward, "is a relic worth finding." Bolt chirped enthusiastically. "Discovery, optimal. Energy readings, fascinating." Seraph's tone darkened. "And potentially dangerous. Captain, I suggest preparing for the possibility of automated defenses." "Great," Durin muttered. "Nothing says welcome like getting shot at by a 10,000-year-old security system." The Terran vault loomed ahead, its immense form blotting out the faint light of the dying red star behind it. Durin's eyes darted across the shimmering glyphs that covered its surface, their faint luminescence creating intricate patterns across the construct's ancient metal skin. "Okay, I'll admit it," Durin said, leaning forward in his chair. "That's impressive. Terrans sure knew how to make an entrance." "They certainly had a flair for grandeur," Seraph replied through the comms. "Though, given the state of this structure, I would classify it as grandeur in decay. Note the meteor strikes and debris impacts, evidence of its millennia-long exposure to space." Durin smirked. "Still standing, though. I'd call that a win," Bolt chirped, his optics scanning the glyphs. "Glyph patterns, active. Response to proximity, probable. Observation, Terran engineering, resilient." "Resilience, one word for it," Durin said, his grin fading slightly. "Seraph, what's the power situation? Those glyphs aren't glowing on good vibes alone." "Preliminary scans indicate erratic power readings within the vault," Seraph explained. "It appears the structure is drawing energy from the dying star. However, the output is unstable and likely insufficient to sustain the entire construct." "So, we're looking at a giant ancient battery that's running on fumes?" Durin asked. "An apt metaphor," Seraph said dryly. As the shuttle drifted closer, the details of the vault became even more apparent. Massive fissures ran across its surface, evidence of ancient impacts and internal stress. Despite its weathered exterior, the core structure appeared unyielding, as if defying the ravages of time. Durin tapped the edge of his console, his antennae twitching. "So, do we just knock on the door, or is this where things start shooting at us?" "That depends," Seraph replied. "The vault's exterior is equipped with numerous openings that may house automated defenses. However, I am detecting a lack of consistent power flow to those systems." "Lack of power sounds like our kind of luck," Durin said. "Bolt, keep your scanners up. If something starts moving, I want to know before it decides we're target practice." Bolt chirped in acknowledgement. "Scanning initiated. Movement detected. Intermittent." Durin's eyes narrowed. "Define intermittent." "Multiple points of activity. Irregular. Size and trajectory suggest drones," Bolt replied. "Of course it's drones," Durin muttered. "It's always drones." Seraph's tone grew sharper. "Their movements suggest maintenance or surveillance functions. However, given the erratic power flow, their operational capacity is likely limited. That does not mean they pose no threat." "Noted," Durin said. "I'm still going to assume they're dangerous. Better safe than a smoking wreck." As the shuttle approached, its sensors picked up faint heat signatures and electromagnetic pulses emanating from deep within the vault. The readings were inconsistent, flickering in and out like a weak signal struggling to hold. "This place is alive," Durin murmured almost to himself. "Barely hanging on, but alive. An apt observation," Seraph said. "The energy readings suggest that some systems within the vault remain functional, though their purpose and stability are uncertain. It is possible that only essential systems were prioritized to preserve the structure's core functions." "Preserve what, though?" Durin asked, his tone tinged with curiosity. "Perhaps we will discover that answer, if we survive the introduction," Seraph said. Before Durin could respond, the vault emitted a low-frequency pulse that resonated through the shuttle. The vibration was deep, almost physical, reverberating in Durin's chest as if the vault itself were speaking. Seraph? What was that?" Durin asked, gripping the controls tightly. "A scanning pulse," Seraph replied. "The vault is actively analyzing its surroundings. It is aware of our presence." "That's not ominous at all," Durin said, his voice tight. "You think it likes us?" "I think it does not care," Seraph said bluntly. "However, it may determine us to be a threat, or an anomaly worth investigating." As if on cue, the sensors began flashing with warnings. The low hum of the shuttle's systems was interrupted by a sharper, more urgent tone. "Captain," Seraph said, his tone clipped. The vault's defense systems are activating. Multiple energy sources are coming online across the surface. Durin's antennae twitched wildly as he adjusted the shuttle's trajectory. And there it is. Bolt, you got anything useful? Defensive systems, partially active, Bolt chirped, his optics flashing rapidly. Energy output, inconsistent. Probability of engagement, high. Great, Durin muttered. Time to see how much this ship can handle. The glyphs on the vault's surface began to glow brighter, their patterns shifting and pulsating in response to the activation of the defense systems. Durin's grip on the controls tightened as the first hints of movement appeared, a series of small drones detaching from the vault and zipping toward the shuttle. Seraph, how about some good news? Durin said, his voice edged with tension. I will let you know if I encounter any, Seraph replied flatly. The vault's shadow loomed larger as the drones approached, their glowing optics locking onto the shuttle. Durin's heart raced, but his grin returned, a mix of fear and exhilaration. All right, boys, he said, steadying his hands on the controls. Let's show them what Wanderer 2 can do. The Wanderer 2 hummed with energy, its sleek frame cutting through the void as the swarm of automated drones closed in. Durin's claws flexed over the controls, his antennae twitching with tension. The glowing optics of the drones locked onto the shuttle, their movements unnervingly synchronized. Well, Seraph, Durin said, his voice tight as he swerved to avoid a jagged piece of debris. Any good news yet? If by good news, you mean the likelihood of our survival improving, then no, Seraph replied evenly. However, I can confirm that the drones are operating on standard Terran interception protocols, non-lethal but highly effective. Oh, great. They're not trying to kill us, Durin muttered. Just immobilize us and let whatever's in there finish the job. An accurate summary, Seraph said. The first volley came without warning, brilliant streaks of energy lancing out from the swarm. Durin rolled the shuttle hard to the left, the pulses narrowly missing the hull. The ship's advanced maneuverability kicked in, responding effortlessly to his every command. Woo! Durin yelled, his grin returning despite the chaos. Now this is flying! Less celebrating, more evading, Seraph said sharply. You've drawn the attention of half the swarm. Only half? Durin quipped, banking sharply to avoid another volley. I'm insulted. Behind him, Bolt chirped nervously. Damage? Probability increasing? Shields, holding, but stress levels rising. Yeah, no kidding, Durin said, his grin fading as a warning chime blared through the cockpit. Seraph, suggestions? Evasive maneuvers remain your best option, Seraph replied. Though given Bolt's designation, he may be able to temporarily disrupt the drone's targeting systems. Bolt? Durin glanced at the little drone, who was already accessing a console with his stabilizing arms. What have you got, buddy? Attempting transmission, Bolt chirped, his tone a mix of determination and anxiety. Maintenance Drone Unit 13, clearance codes deploying. The drones paused mid-flight, their synchronized movements faltering for a brief moment. A few even retreated slightly, their optics dimming as if reassessing the shuttle. It worked! Durin exclaimed. Partially, Seraph corrected. The clearance codes have disrupted their primary targeting systems, but the effect is temporary. Their secondary protocols are adapting. As if to punctuate Seraph's point, several drones broke formation and resumed their pursuit, firing another volley of disabling energy pulses. Of course they are, Durin said, rolling the shuttle to avoid the incoming fire. Bolt, can you keep them confused for a little longer? Retransmitting now, Bolt chirped, his optics flashing brightly. The drones faltered again, their movements becoming erratic. That's my bot, Durin said, pulling the shuttle into a sharp climb. Seraph, what's our exit strategy? There is a narrow corridor through the defense grid, Seraph said. However, it requires precise navigation to avoid triggering additional automated systems. Precision's my middle name, Durin said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. Let's hope so, Seraph replied. Sending the coordinates now. The display lit up with a glowing path through the chaotic swarm, weaving between clusters of drones and debris. Durin tightened his grip on the controls, his focus narrowing as he guided the shuttle through the maze. Shields, holding at 70%, Bolt reported. Good enough, Durin muttered, banking hard to avoid a drone that had regained its targeting. The vault loomed closer with every maneuver, its glyph-covered surface glowing ominously. As they neared a docking platform, the drones suddenly broke off their pursuit, retreating in perfect unison. Seraph? Durin asked, his antennae twitching. The drones have returned to their default patrol routes, Seraph said. It appears they are no longer prioritizing us as a threat. I'll take it, Durin said, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Before he could celebrate, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the shuttle's comm system. The words were fragmented, spoken in an unsettlingly mechanical tone. Attention, intruders. The vault's keeper awaits. Only those who hold the purpose may proceed. Durin exchanged a glance with Bolt, who chirped nervously. Cryptic warnings, concerning. Yeah, no kidding, Durin said, his grip on the controls tightening. Seraph, any idea what that means? None, Seraph replied, though I suspect we are about to find out. As the warning faded, the shuttle glided toward the docking platform. The glyphs on the surface of the vault shimmered brighter, casting an eerie light across the deck. All right, Durin said, his voice steady despite the tension. Let's see what kind of welcome the Keeper has in store for us. The Wanderer, too, glided smoothly toward the docking platform, the glyphs on the vault's surface shimmering faintly as though acknowledging their arrival. Durin eased the shuttle into position, his claws dancing over the controls with a mix of focus and relief. Docking successful, Seraph announced, though his tone carried more caution than celebration. Bolt's clearance codes appear to have granted us limited access. However, the docking systems are only partially functional. Partially functional? Durin asked, his antennae twitching. You mean like half broken or half working? That distinction is purely semantic, Seraph replied. Durin rolled his eyes. Right. Thanks for clearing that up, Bolt chirped, his optics glowing brightly as he examined the console. Docking clamps, engaged. Power flow, minimal but stable. Minimal's better than none, Durin said, rising from the captain's chair. All right, Bolt. Let's take a look outside and see what kind of welcome this place has in store for us. Proceed with caution, Seraph said. While the docking bay appears structurally intact, the erratic power flow could trigger unforeseen complications. Unforeseen complications, Durin muttered, grabbing his gear and reaching for his suit. He slipped it on quickly, sealing the helmet with a faint hiss. That's just fancy talk, for this is probably a trap. The docking bay was vast and eerily quiet. The faint glow of scattered lights cast long, flickering shadows across the metal floor, while the glyph-covered walls seemed to pulse faintly in time with the dying star's energy output. The air was heavy with the weight of centuries, each step echoing into the stillness. Durin stepped cautiously onto the platform, his eyes scanning the dimly lit space. Bolt trundled beside him, his stabilizing arms extending to navigate the uneven terrain. This place gives me the creeps, Durin said, his antennae twitching. Noted, Seraph replied. The docking systems are barely operational, which explains the sporadic lighting and lack of environmental stabilization. However, I am detecting faint energy signatures deeper within the vault. Of course you are, Durin said. Wouldn't be fun if everything worked perfectly, right? Bolt tilted his dome, his optics flickering as he scanned the walls. Glyphs, consistent with Terran design. Translation? Incomplete. Let me guess, Durin said, glancing at the little drone. Something cryptic about danger or destiny? Translation, ongoing, Bolt chirped, his tone slightly defensive. As they advanced further into the docking bay, a soft hum filled the air, followed by the flickering activation of a holographic projection. A faintly glowing figure materialized ahead of them, its form flickering with static. Seraph? Durin asked, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. What's that? A projection, Seraph replied. It appears to be a Terran figure, though the data is heavily degraded. Allow me to enhance the audio feed. The projection crackled, its form stabilizing just enough to reveal a humanoid shape, clad in what looked like a formal Terran uniform. Its voice, fragmented and distorted, echoed through the chamber. Warning! Energy reserves, critically low. Star output, failing. Time is short. Preserve what remains. The hologram fizzled, and for a moment, Durin and Bolt stood in silence, the weight of the message settling over them. Well, that's ominous, Durin said, breaking the quiet. An understatement, Seraph said. The reference to the star's output suggests that the vault's systems and likely its purpose, are dependent on the energy it provides. If the star fails, the vault's functionality will collapse. So we're on borrowed time, Durin muttered, glancing toward the faintly illuminated corridor ahead. Great. Just what we needed. Efficiency is advisable, Seraph said. Proceed toward the main entrance, but remain alert. The power fluctuations increase the probability of unexpected events. The faint hum of power grew louder as they approached the main entrance, a massive, glyph-covered door that towered over them like a silent sentinel. Bolt chirped as he scanned the glyphs, his stabilizing arms extending to examine the intricate patterns. Translation, incomplete. Glyphs suggest access protocol required, Bolt reported. Of course they do, Durin said, running a claw along the edge of the door. Nothing's ever simple with Terrans, is it? Simple solutions rarely endure the test of time, Seraph replied. As Durin examined the door, the lights in the docking bay suddenly dimmed, plunging the space into near darkness. A low, resonant hum filled the air, growing steadily louder. Seraph? Durin asked, stepping back from the door. What's happening? The vault systems are reacting to your proximity, Seraph said. Energy output from the star has surged, though its stability remains uncertain. I suggest preparing for potential disruptions. Disruptions, Durin repeated, gripping his gear tightly. That's a nice way of saying we're about to have company, isn't it? As the hum reached its peak, the glyphs on the door flared to life, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. Durin's heart raced as he took a step back, his antennae twitching with unease. All right, Bolt, he said, his voice steady despite the tension. Let's see what's behind door number 1. Durin stared at the massive glyph-covered door, its intricate patterns glowing faintly in the dim light of the docking bay. The symbols shimmered and shifted, as if alive, responding to the faint hum of the vault's failing energy systems. Well, Durin said, crossing his arms and squinting at the glyphs, this is about as welcoming as a spiked handshake. Terrans were known for their security measures, Seraph replied through the comms. This door appears to be locked by a complex access protocol. Bolt, see if your clearance codes can make progress. Bolt trundled closer, his stabilizing arms extending as he scanned the glyphs. Accessing interface. Maintenance drone unit 13. Recognition detected. The glyphs pulsed brighter for a moment, and part of the door's locking mechanism began to shift, gears grinding slowly to life. Then, with a hiss, the lights on the glyphs dimmed again, leaving the door sealed. Progress insufficient, Bolt chirped, tilting his dome apologetically. Durin sighed, stepping forward. Looks like it's up to me. Seraph, any chance you've got a cheat sheet for this? Unlikely, Seraph replied. The glyphs appear to be a mix of standard Terran symbols and a more esoteric code. Your intuition as a relic hunter may prove more useful here. Great, Durin muttered, rolling up his sleeves. No pressure. He crouched in front of the door, running a claw along the edge of the symbols. His antennae twitched as he studied the patterns, his mind racing through his knowledge of Terran artifacts and glyphs. These, he muttered, pointing to a set of interlocking symbols, look like navigation markers. And these, he gestured to another grouping, are definitely part of their timekeeping system. Interesting, Seraph said. It's possible the locking mechanism requires aligning these elements into a coherent sequence, perhaps a representation of a star chart or a temporal cycle. Star charts and timekeeping, Durin said, grinning. Terrans really didn't make anything easy, did they? They were not known for their simplicity, Seraph quipped. Durin began pressing and twisting the glyphs, rearranging the patterns into what he hoped was a logical sequence. The door emitted a low hum, and part of the locking mechanism shifted again, but it still didn't open. Bolt, give me some light over here, Durin said, motioning to the little drone. Light activated, Bolt chirped, projecting a beam from his optics onto the glyphs. Durin leaned in closer, his claws tapping against the symbols as his mind worked furiously. All right, if these represent navigation markers, then this one should point to here. He adjusted one of the symbols, watching as it began to glow brighter. And if this is part of their timekeeping system, he murmured, shifting another glyph into place. The hum grew louder, and the locking mechanism clicked audibly. Captain, your deductions appear to be correct, Seraph said. One more adjustment should suffice. Durin smirked, his antennae twitching with satisfaction. You know, Seraph, You could try sounding a little impressed every once in a while. Noted, Seraph replied flatly. With a final twist of the glyphs, the locking mechanism roared to life. The door creaked and groaned as it began to slide open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. All right, Durin said, stepping back as the heavy door finished moving. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the vault. The corridor beyond was vast and imposing, its walls lined with faintly glowing blue lights that barely illuminated the space. The air was cold and heavy, carrying the unmistakable weight of centuries of abandonment. Bolt chirped nervously, his optics scanning the corridor. Environment, stable. Energy readings, erratic. Durin stepped cautiously into the corridor, his claws flexing on the grip of his machete. This place feels alive, like it's watching us. That is unlikely, Seraph said. However, I am detecting an increase in the vault's energy output. The dying star's power surge appears to be stabilizing certain systems. Stabilizing systems, Durin repeated, his voice tinged with unease. I'm guessing that means more surprises waiting for us. Surprises are highly probable, Seraph replied. As they ventured deeper into the corridor, the hum of the vault grew louder, and the glyphs on the walls pulsed faintly with light. The atmosphere was oppressive, each step echoing into the vast emptiness. Then, without warning, the vault emitted another low pulse. The vibration was deeper this time, resonating through the walls and floor like the heartbeat of a slumbering giant. Seraph? Durin asked, gripping his weapon tighter. What was that? Another energy surge, Seraph replied. The vault's systems are reacting to your presence. The star's output has increased, though its stability remains tenuous. Durin's antennae twitched. You think it's rolling out the welcome mat or something worse? That depends on your definition of welcome, Seraph said. Durin sighed, glancing back at Bolt. Well, buddy, looks like we're officially in the thick of it. Let's hope this place is more friendly than it looks. As the pulse faded, the corridor ahead seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness, promising answers and dangers hidden within. The corridor stretched deeper into the vault, the blue glyphs on the walls glowing faintly, their light flickering as the failing energy systems struggled to keep them alive. Durin adjusted his pace, his antennae twitching as he scanned the path ahead. Seraph, any updates on what we're walking into? He asked, his voice low but laced with curiosity. Beyond erratic energy readings and increased heat signatures, nothing definitive, Seraph replied through the comms. The deeper you go, the more unstable the readings become. Proceed cautiously. Proceed cautiously, Durin muttered, glancing down at Bolt, who was trundling along beside him. When have we ever done that? Never, Seraph said flatly. Bolt chirped, his optics scanning the glyphs on the walls. Environment deteriorating. Energy levels decreasing. Recommendation, efficiency. Efficiency, Durin said with a smirk. Another way of saying, hurry before we all die. They rounded a corner, and the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Durin froze in place, his eyes widening as the scene before him came into view. Rows upon rows of cryopods stretched into the distance, their surfaces frosted with age and neglect. Dim lights flickered above them, casting eerie reflections on the polished glass. Seraph? Durin said, stepping cautiously into the chamber. Tell me you're seeing this. I am, Seraph replied, his voice quieter now. These appear to be cryopods. The readings from your suit indicate that each pod contains a human in suspended animation. Durin's antennae twitched as he approached the nearest pod. Inside, a man lay still, his features preserved as though he had just fallen asleep. Ice crystals clung to the edges of the pod, and faint streams of vapor hissed from a crack in the seal. Humans, Durin murmured, running a claw along the pod's surface. They're alive? Barely, Seraph said. The pods are dependent on the energy from the star, which, as you know, is failing. If the power systems collapse entirely, these humans will not survive. Bolt tilted his dome, his optics flickering as he scanned the rows of pods. Count exceeds 2,000. Preservation, fragile. Terran purpose, significant. Durin took a step back, his claws tapping nervously against the handle of his machete. 2,000 humans frozen in time. This isn't just a relic, it's a whole civilization on ice. Precisely, Seraph said. This vault appears to be a preservation facility, a last hope for the Terran species. The weight of the discovery settled over them, the hum of the failing systems growing louder in the silence. Then a sharp metallic screech echoed through the chamber, breaking the stillness. "What was that?" Durin asked, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Unknown," Seraph said. "But I suggest preparing for—" Before he could finish, a towering humanoid figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. The sentinel stood over 3 meters tall, its sleek metallic body adorned with glowing glyphs that pulsed faintly in time with the vault's energy fluctuations. Its optics glowed a deep crimson, locking onto Durin and Bolt as it stepped forward. "Welcome, outsider," the sentinel said, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "State your purpose." Durin froze, his antennae standing on end. Seraph? Little help?" "I would suggest answering truthfully," Seraph said. "The sentinel appears to be tied to the vault's systems. Hostility may not end in your favor." "Yeah, got that," Durin muttered. He raised his hands slowly, glancing at Bolt, who chirped nervously beside him. "We're, explorers," Durin said, his voice wavering slightly. "Looking for Terran relics. No harm meant." The sentinel took another step forward, its optics narrowing as it scanned them. "Explorers," it repeated, its tone measured but firm. "You have entered the vault of humanity's last hope. Your intentions will determine your fate." Durin's heart raced as he held the sentinel's gaze, his mind scrambling for a response. Behind him, the flickering lights of the chamber cast long shadows across the rows of cryopods, each one a silent reminder of the lives at stake. "Seraph," Durin said quietly, his voice tinged with urgency. "You've got a plan, right?" "I am formulating one," Seraph replied. "In the meantime, do try not to provoke it." "Yeah, great advice," Durin muttered, his antennae twitching wildly. The sentinel's optics brightened as it took another step closer, its voice echoing once more. "State your purpose or be removed." Durin swallowed hard, his claws flexing nervously. "Well, this is going great," he muttered under his breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him as the sentinel loomed over them.